Well, Marina, thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you,
Oh,
Jack, for
how are you
having me.
doing?
Good, good. All things considered.
Yeah, exactly, because you're not in the UK at the moment, are you?
I'm not. I am across the border in Germany. So yeah, no, I've done a bit of fishing. Luckily, fishing is a COVID activity, so we're lucky. We're very fortunate.
I guess it makes sense for a lot of countries across the world, really. I guess because fishing's outdoors and typically you're on your own, or if you're not on your own, you can space. So it makes sense for it to be allowed, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are restrictions. You can't, for example, for me, I couldn't take people out and guide and instruct at the moment. But because fishing is considered a solo sport, you can go out by yourself. And we've seen a huge increase since the press came and out and said that you can go fishing or go play golf, which was the first lockdown. There's been an increase of 114% rod licenses last
Yeah.
year, and now fishing continues to be a COVID allowed activity, and I don't think golf is because it's a very social activity, I guess.
No, well, I can't stand golf, so that's not really going to. Sorry if anyone likes golf, but I'm not.
Lucky for you.
Yeah, yeah. I forget. There's a famous quote, isn't it? It's the best way to spoil a walk. I think it's
Yeah.
often lumped in with Churchill, but I don't think Churchill did say that. But yeah. Anyway, we're not. I'm not here to slag off golf. I'm here to talk about fishing. So, when did you start fishing? Was it from a young age?
Yeah, I started when I was around the age of 5. My parents were very much into fishing. That's all we did for family holidays. Everything was sort of orientated around fishing. So wherever we were in the world, we would always make sure that we had some fishing at hand. And a lot of our sort of holidays were driving up to Scotland in a car as a family and just spending the time outdoors with our dogs and fishing, whether that's using conventional tackle or fly fishing. But we really spent a lot of time outdoors.
Because you're quite dog. You mentioned dogs. You're quite dog-minded as well, aren't you?
Yes, I do have a dog. His name is Sedge, and I rescued him from Romania, and he
Ah,
loves.
a couple of my friends have done that. Like, it seems to be quite popular now, doesn't it? Like getting these. Was he a street dog or just in a pound there or?
Yeah, he was a street dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to do. And I guess now after Brexit, I don't know whether we'll be, or maybe it's just more expensive to do it. But at the time, I rescued him 3 years ago, and I think it was £250 for everything. That's including travel, microchip, neuter, everything.
Yeah, because
So
I
incredible.
like how we've gone on to a tangent about dogs on this, but
Yeah.
like, the price of dogs has shot up
Oh,
through. I mean, like I was because we've got a miniature dachshund, and we were like, oh, let's get her a little friend, and we were looking, and the price of puppies is it's like 2.5 grand. And we can't justify that, and but even the rescue dogs are quite difficult to get hold of now, so it seems to be.
yeah. And now they're saying instead of puppies aren't just for Christmas, they're saying puppies aren't just for lockdown.
No, exactly. I think there'll be a lot of rescue dogs when this is over, or
Mm.
certainly when it's relaxed, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
kind of back onto fishing. What drives you to go fishing then? I mean, a lot of people who don't go fishing, I think this is one of the things they probably ask anglers the most is why do you do it? Like, what makes you want to go out and catch fish?
I think for me, it always changes. So I guess when I was in my early 20s, it was something that basically I grew up, and then my parents separated. I was 11, and I only did it through my teenage years. I probably only did it a couple of times a year. So it wasn't like it was ingrained in my lifestyle at all. And then I moved to London in my early 20s when I was 21. And I found that my weekends were just repeating themselves. So I wasn't actually achieving anything. I would go out with friends and I would be hungover on Sunday and I would get takeaway, and what most people do is just, but for me it made me just feel very useless. I needed to achieve, I needed to keep busy, needed to achieve. And So I thought about things that would get me outside, challenge me. And that's when my parents, well, actually, before my birthday, I thought, okay, why don't I give fishing a go again, but by myself this time, not with my parents, you know, because, you know, when you're going with someone who knows their stuff and you've going by yourself, you're really chucked into the deep end. So you've got to, I think you've got to be quite brave. And this is my point is that, well, my end point, which I shouldn't say now, I should say at the end, but it's, it doesn't take long for you to gather information and get used to doing it by yourself. You've just got to take that plunge. And basically when I decided that I wanted to fish more, my parents at the time, when I was 21, they both gave me a salmon rod and a trout rod. And so now I had a little bit more independence. I had, you know, I had a car. So I asked some questions to local fishing shops and friends that would probably know where I could start. I remember I had a friend called Angus who loved fishing, and I asked him where I can go fishing near London, and he said Zion Park. So that's where I started. I sort of started out just by going every single weekend, and I became so addicted. And at the time, you know, my casting was probably rubbish, and it was just something that I had grown up with. I had never had tuition, or, you know, I'd just been given a rod. Okay, there you go and catch a fish. So it was a time where I learned the most, probably because I was by myself. If I was stuck, I would probably Google on my phone, how do you tie this knot? Or, you know, and then I just learnt on the job, really. And so it progressed. So basically my point is that back then it was all about really honing in my technique of fishing, my casting, my knowledge on knots, how I managed to handle the fish at the time, because no one teaches you how to handle the fish. And a lot of people I find now when I teach, they're so scared of touching the fish or handling the fish because they just don't know what to do. So that's part of the reason I think a lot of people don't go fishing by themselves in the beginning, because they have no idea about fish handling. So that's a really, I think that's number one, is to learn fish handling before you go out, you know, into the world, instead of just going out there and just trying to discover it out by yourself, or watch YouTube videos or read books about it, because that's really, really important. And then it sort of goes through stages of, since I was 21, so it was all about technique, and then it grew to, you know, because now I was discovering that I could cast and catch a fish. Now I wanted to catch as many as possible, and then I wanted to progress onto other species. So it wouldn't just be trout, it would be other things like maybe pike or carp or bass, things that you can catch in the UK. And then it went on to international travel. And by that time, I had probably gained as much experience to then go and start doing some exams. So I did the Angling Trust 1 and 2 coaching exam, and then I did my FFI Fly Fishers International Casting Instructor exams in 2018. So then it was just a factor of me, I think now I've been guiding for 4 years now. So I made it into a career 4 years ago, which was very satisfying. And it hasn't been easy. It's not just like, you know, I left my job in London where I was getting a salary. I knew that money would come in at the end of the month. You know, it was hard grinding. And I don't have weekends off anymore. It's not like you have a 9-to-5 job where you can switch off at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening and then go and totally relax and not have to think about work. You know, I think about work all the time. I'm never off, apart from this Christmas. I think I had 2 weeks off, and it was just amazing. I've never watched so much TV and just relaxed and not thought about anything and ignored my emails. So now, you know, it's hard work being self-employed, and it's hard work being self-employed when you're working in an industry that is so small, and the market is small, although growing now. You know,
it's the life of a freelancer as well. What you've described pretty much is that, yeah, there's no such thing as a weekend. And I took the week after I got married, I thought, right, I'm actually going to have a week off. And I thought, when's the last time I had a week off? And I thought, I don't think I have since I started. So it's healthy to do, but it's nice. It's nice to do it as well. And it's interesting hearing you say your background, because it's quite similar to mine in that my parents split up when I was quite young. And then when I went to university, I kind of gave up on other distractions at university. Just I didn't bother fishing for a while, and then I came back to it when I finished uni. And I don't fish very often now, but when I do, it's a real treat. And I make sure I leave the camera at home, just because I think it is nice to have some. I know fishing's you love it and it's your job, but I like to kind of treat it as a treat, really, just something to just go and enjoy. And I don't necessarily go all day. I might only sneak a couple of hours on the local canal or on a little river trotting or something like that. But it's just nice to recharge the batteries, I find, especially with all the benefits of mental health and whatnot.
And for you, was it the chicken or the egg that came first? Was it the fishing, or was it the underwater photography and videography?
Well, it was wildlife first. I was always interested in nature first, and then I picked up a rod when I was 11. And then I just thought, oh, this is great. I get to see things that I wouldn't normally get to see. And then I kind of thought, how can I turn this into a career? So I did a degree in Falmouth in Cornwall. So I lived down in Cornwall for 3 years. I did a bit of sea fishing down there, which was quite nice. And then kind of thought, well, how can I marry these two? And filming fish was the solution.
Cool.
It's one of what I've been doing. Eight odd years now I've been doing it. So
amazing.
It doesn't seem that long, but yeah, it has been a while, I guess. Now I've been plugging away, so keeps me busy.
And I started, I got a wetsuit last year, and I started just swimming with the fish. And you beat me to it, because I went to Diva and I fished there. I can't remember when it was, maybe in the spring, summer.
Okay.
And I asked them, because I just because I'm really obsessed with fish, and I'm sure it's exactly like you. I absolutely love them, and it doesn't matter whether I'm catching them or just looking at them.
Yeah.
So I have a friend called Mark Barry, who I'm sure you know.
I know of him.
He
Yeah.
does underwater videography, and I asked him whether I could tag along, and I got a wetsuit, and it was more to do with the fact that about the pollution situation right now that we've got going on in our waterways at the moment. But when I went to Diva, I was like, it will be fantastic to go fishing with these monstrous trout. And so I asked them, and they were like, yeah, sure, come back next time. And I wasn't able to go. And then I saw you at Diva Springs, and someone sent me a video saying, this guy beat you to it. And I was like, who is that? And then it didn't say your name anywhere, so I had to track it down. But then you popped up and said, just been to Diva Springs and filmed, and I was like, it was Jack. And I was like, and so I really want to go there, because I bet that was amazing.
Well, I was actually there filming on the chalk stream, the Diva, because there's some big grayling in there, some real monster grayling. So I wanted to get those, and then I didn't twig that Diva Springs was right next to it, and it's literally just across the road. I thought, well, I've got to have a look. I've been watching angling programs all my life, and you see like John Wilson or whoever fishing it in the 90s, and I thought, I've got to poke my head in.
Yeah.
And I just rolled. I don't know what the guy must have thought. I just rolled up and said, "Can I jump in your stock pond?" And they were like, "Yeah, okay." So they let me go in, and these, it's not everyone's cup of tea. I mean, I did get a few people go, "Oh, it's not very, very nice seeing all these big fish," but it's gin clear water. Amazing being in the water with fish that large. There's 20-pound trout, some of them absolute monsters, and there's a lot of wild fish in there as well. There's lots of minnows, eels, pike. There are a couple of pike in there, roach. So there's all sorts.
So wait, did you go into the main ponds, or did you?
This is a stock pond. There was loads of other stuff
so
in
you
the
went.
stock pond. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to the big lake.
There's behind the big lake. That's where he keeps all his monsters. So that's where I hopped in. He did say I could go in the lake if there were no anglers, but I didn't want to kind of. I would think if I was fishing, the last thing I'd want to see is me swimming by by your peg. So I decided to keep out of there. But it was still good fun and quite enjoyed that.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask is, I bet you get asked this all the time, but do you think women anglers are better? Because there seems to be this perception, I guess, with a lot of anglers, or not perception, But there's a whole thing about pheromones that people, I don't know if there's anything in the whole pheromone thing, but like with Georgina Ballantyne being the record holder for salmon. And I think the largest catfish or official catfish was caught by a woman as well. So women seem to have this power to catch these big fish. But do you think women make better anglers, or do you not think it really matters?
I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to prove that, well, scientifically prove that. But
Yeah.
I think that from my experience guiding and instructing women or men, I think women, because it's perceived as a male dominated sport, I think
Yeah.
women get extra excited when they do well. And I think they do, I think, especially with fly fishing, the casting is all about finesse. It's not about overpowering the rod. And I think that women naturally are more gentle when they cast. So I found that it's much easier to tell someone who is applying, not applying enough power and momentum into the cast by telling them just to add a little bit more power and acceleration. I think it's much easier to tell someone that rather than telling someone to rein it in and put less power on the acceleration and the power and acceleration during the cast. So I think it is, because guys, I mean, everyone says guys overpower the rod and they try and cast to the other side, which I think a lot of guys will say, women are better listeners and women don't try and cast to the other side of the river or lake. But I think that's again, like, you know, men can cast further than women.
Yeah,
which
like a macho thing.
I think could be true, because I did my first world championship casting in Milan, and the men do cast further than the women. But in saying that, when you're casting distance and you're, let's say, in that situation where it is actually there is a part where there is you know, your strength is quite important. But I do think that just normal fishing, let's say you're fishing a little stream, and I think maybe women come across as better anglers because they're, you know, they don't have as much testosterone. So when things aren't going right, they're more calm, whereas men might get a little bit more angst. And we all know that angry people do not catch fish. So
Do you think there's a reason that there's more men than women anglers then? Because I can't see, I don't know if there is a reason, or if you've got a theory behind that, or.
I think that it's difficult. I think it's been a male dominated sport for so long. And I think in history, I mean, obviously there's been women who have been out there fishing forever.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, Georgina Ballantyne, Tiny Morrison, who's got the second record. But I think that men have always had a little bit more, I think fishing and outdoor sports have always been a little bit more accessible to them historically. So I think that's why we are now seeing such an increase in women in outdoor sports, is because it's more accessible to us. You know, not all of us stay at home and look after the children. Like, most of us are all out, and whether we are stay-at-home mums, we get to go out and do stuff now. We run our own businesses, we have more freedom. And I also think that fishing, you know, for a lot of girls, again, historically, we like girly things and guys like manly things, and fishing is outdoors. Sometimes it's in the pouring rain or freezing cold temperatures. And I think, you know, now that more women are getting into these outdoor sports, it's now something that women can go, oh, I can do that. That doesn't actually look that hard. And yeah, we are seeing a huge increase in women. And actually, it's the fastest growing sector in the sport.
Oh, okay. Do you find that perceptions are changing? Because I guess not negative perceptions, but like, so for example, if a woman turns up to a fishery, it can sometimes almost be jarring for male anglers. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I'm just saying they're like, oh, why is she fishing? Because it is so male dominated. But would you say perceptions are changing then in that regard?
I think that men are always surprised when women turn up to go fishing.
Yeah.
I think that when they start fishing, and the men can, it either goes two ways. It either goes that the woman doesn't know and she's a beginner, and they try and help her as much as possible, and they come and they might give her a fly, or
Okay.
and
So
that's nice. And sometimes
not so much mansplaining, but actually genuinely trying to help, you mean?
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a little patronizing, but at the same time, like, they're just trying to help. And actually, I
Okay.
would rather have someone try and help me than someone just ignoring me. And when you walk behind them, they don't even turn around and say hi,
Yeah.
and they know you're there. But, or it can, yeah. So I don't know what my second point was, to be honest, but I think that 5 years ago, when I used to go alone a lot to still waters, sometimes they would just, some guys would be like, you don't see many women,
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
here.
Classic line.
I
Yeah.
did have a funny occasion when I was guiding a lady, and we were on our home lake of one of our local still waters called Tanfield, and the lady actually got wet. Well, she fell in to the lake.
Okay.
She didn't even fall in. She kind of went swimming by accident, and then she went to the bank, and she was completely soaked through. So she took her waders off, took her trousers off, and over the brow of the hill, a man was walking with his rod to go back to the car park, and she had literally just pulled her trousers down where it revealed a black thong. And he was, I was watching him because I was standing in front of her, and I was watching him, and he was so shocked. He did not know what to do. Honestly, it looked like he was just about to have a heart attack. And he wanted to look, but he didn't want for me to know that he was looking.
No,
So I was laughing, and she was like, what are you laughing at? And she looked around, and he was there, and she was just like, oh, I'm so sorry. And he was like, oh, don't be sorry. And he was like, I never come fishing and see that, so yeah, I'll be going home a happy man. But I think what I'm trying to say is, women out fishing, men and women are different. We see things differently, we speak differently about certain subjects. So I think it's really refreshing to have that point of view from both sexes, because I find that women get a lot more excited, but more in a little bit of like a hyper way when they catch fish, whereas men, they sort of, they'll be a bit more chilled about it. They won't be as surprised that they've achieved something, whereas women are like, oh my god, I can't believe it's my first fish.
Yeah.
And they'll sort of go, get really excited. But I think that both aspects, I think men bring something to sport, and I think women bring something to the sport, and I think that a balance of that is really, really healthy for the industry and community.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's good to have both sides on that. On a more kind of general question, I mean, anglers are often obsessed with the weight of the fish. Do you think there's a reason why anglers? Because the classic example is, say, I mean, everyone goes on about a 2 pound roach, which is kind of like, but I always think, well, if you caught a 1 pound 15 ounce roach, would that not be still a special fish? Like, I mean, I personally don't weigh fish. I never bother. I should do, really, but I just like to look at them as they are. I don't think weight's that important, but obviously some anglers are obsessed with it. And I just wondered if you had a theory or as to why anglers are so obsessed with the weight of fish.
No, it's an interesting question, actually, because
And
I
we'll
guess
move on.
back in the day, years ago, you catch and release wasn't, it wasn't a massive thing that we practiced, and now, instead of taking your fish home and perhaps telling your friends how big your fish was, or now we need to, I think people feel that they need to record things, so that because a lot of people, they use their social media as a sort of fishing diary.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about, I guess some certain species, personally, I've started recording the length, because a lot of the time the length, for example, a pike or a trout, I think a lot of people do get obsessed with this, and I think that I'm actually really enjoying measuring the length and then seeing, is my next catch going to be bigger or smaller, and recording these down. But
it's more a
I guess
European and American thing, isn't it? They tend to do length over weight.
Yeah. Yeah, but weighing wise, I only weigh something if it's a big fish. I don't necessarily weigh small fish, and that's not to say, turn my nose up at smaller fish, because I would still take a picture of a small fish. And I think it's what's happened in that in to lead up to that moment. I think if that's a really special fish for you, then maybe. But I don't know about weighing. Maybe I think that's more coarse fishing, I would say.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's not such a big deal in fly fishing.
I mean, it is, like, people love to weigh their fish in fly fishing as well. But I think coarse fishing is definitely very much focused on how big a certain, how much a certain species weighs. But I don't know. What's your theory on this?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose if you think about it, the bigger the fish are, the more wily. Well, they should be more wily, so they should be harder to catch. So maybe it's kind of like the prowess of I've caught the biggest and rarest fish. So maybe that's that. Or I mean, it could come down to just simple glory hunting in a way. People want to. I mean, there's a difference between being proud of what you've caught, obviously, but then there is this whole subsect of angling who just want to catch the biggest fish to get in a paper or be recognized for whatever, which it's good, I guess. I mean, I was actually present for a British rod caught record. I was with the guy who caught the record stickleback.
That's cool. Claim to fame.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, so I didn't catch it, but he did. But that was because he was going to just chuck it back. I was like, no, that's definitely over the record. And then he had to go home, get some kitchen scales to weigh it, because he didn't have any scales low enough. And then it was it's about I think it was 10 grams or something like that, which for a stickleback is pretty big. But it was a female that had laid eggs, so if he'd caught it with its eggs, it would have been.
Oh wow!
So there's a record to beat out there somewhere if someone wants to bivvy up and try and get a record stickleback. But he was really chuffed with it. He was quite happy with that.
I wouldn't say, let's say I've posted something on social media and I've guesstimated that it's, let's say, 19 pounds or 21 pounds or however big the fish is. I don't tend to guesstimate and then tell everyone how much it weighs.
You've made a great point there as well, because social media can be pretty toxic on the subject of fish weights, which is another reason why I don't put that, because the amount of fishing groups I'm on and someone says, I've just caught a 10-pound barbel, and half the comments are, that's not 10 pounds, that's
exactly.
And it's like, why does it matter, it can be really toxic and horrible on there. So that's a good point, actually.
I also think the IGFA records, it's obviously so much about the IGF records because IGFA records because of the tippet class. So certain species, you have your tippet classes and you have your world records, and people go out and they catch these pretty big fish actually on very light tippet, and I just don't agree with it. I just think as well, like I've recently.
Sorry, Marina, I've not come across that. So what's that? They use light line to catch big fish?
Yeah, so they have class systems, tippet class systems. So for example, they'll fish for marlin with 20-pound tippet.
Oh, right.
So basically, the thing about it is, and a lot of people out there, they love IGFA and they're really for it, but I think the problem is that when you're fighting such big fish on light tippet, you're not going to try and get it in as quickly as possible. You're going to really carefully, and I'm just not sure. Like the more I see, I came across someone's profile the other day who was an IGFA record holder, and pretty much all their fish were held through the gills, and these were trout, and then it stated that they were all catch and release. And just for people out there, if you do hold, and most of us, there's probably a very small percentage of people who would think that this is okay, but holding the fish through the gills, especially with a trout, not saying for predators, like pike and zander, you can go through the gills and they've got this little sort of indent where you hold them. But with trout, you'll kill them. Fact. There is no way you can hold a trout through its gills and expect that fish to be okay afterwards. So I was just surprised that IGFA had supported someone who was holding fish through the gills and then saying they had caught and released. So I don't know, there's a lot of sort of, you know, things around, a lot of debate going around whether it's right or wrong. But I think that once you get into world records and trying to chase that, I think for me personally, and I know that a lot of people chase them for certain reasons, but for me, I think it would ruin fishing for me, because I would always be thinking, competing, you know, just to catch that world record, and anything that isn't a world record would be not as important to me.
Yeah, I think it would put pressure and stress, and that's not why we fish, is it really? So I definitely agree with that. You're predominantly associated with fly fishing, so especially trout and salmon. But have you tried for other species? I think you did mention earlier about carp and bass, but is it just those you tend to target, or you go for kind of a plethora?
So I mainly guide for trout and salmon.
Yeah.
And then I always say that my hobby is fishing for other species. So I caught a big zander the other day, which was 95 centimeters long,
All
which
right.
is pretty big. Yeah, it's a monster zander. So I fish for anything, really, literally anything. It doesn't matter whether it's the tiniest fish or the biggest fish. You know, anything is game for me. I'm obsessed with fish, and for me, I'm so obsessed with fish that how could I just fish for two species? So yeah, pike, carp, any saltwater species, jungle species, anything I can get my hands on, really.
Yeah, good. I think that's kind of the way I adapted that. I've never been to say, haven't been fussed about big fish, but I like to catch a variety of
Yeah.
different species. So I like to kind of target venues that have got a good. So it's why, I mean, I don't live anywhere near the sea, but I quite enjoy the light rock fishing. Like, if you've seen the LRF, you know, when they target the little mini marine species on tiny lures. Have you come across that?
Ooh. What about wrasse?
Yeah, so
Did you catch wrasse?
basically there's a whole subsect of anglers. I was just chatting to Jeremy Wade about this, and they use really tiny lures off like marinas and harbours, and they catch like gobies, blennies, wrasse, you name it. You know, you can catch 20 species in a day. If I lived nearer the coast, I'd be obsessed with it. But obviously, Nottingham is not particularly ideally situated for sea fishing, but that's quite good fun. But I enjoy, gudgeon. I love catching gudgeon and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So anything that swims really. And I was trying to dig out a good anecdote about you. So I reached out to my spies, and they've told me about a time that you went to the Lake District and you climbed up a mountain but forgot some gas. So you had to share some pate with 4 people and 2 dogs. Do you remember that?
Hey, did you talk to Sarah by
I
any
did talk
chance?
to Sarah, yes.
Yes, she forgot the wine.
Well, that's the most important thing. I mean, bloody hell.
It was. It was. It was funny. Oh, Sarah's such a good girl, and I really enjoy her company. And I don't get to see her as much as I want to, but we did have this incredible time climbing Coniston, and we went fishing as well. We took our dogs. We went camping up above. What do they say? Like wild camping, you have to be above the farming line, like sheep, and
Okay.
apparently that's a rule anyway. So we made sure that we were above that, and we slept in the most beautiful place. It was next to a lake, and in the morning we woke up. I think it was 4 o'clock, and we climbed the rest of Coniston in the early morning, and we saw the sunrise with our dogs. It was just so beautiful. And yeah, but I do blame her still for not having a party up there, because she forgot the wine.
No, well, you have to just get euphoric off the scenery instead, rather than
Yeah,
rather than
exactly.
wine. Well, before we go, I'm just going to do some quick fire questions. So, what was the first fish you caught?
Oof. I think it was probably a stillwater trout. We used to, when we were really young, we used to go to a trout fishery called Donington Trout Farm, and it was only 5 minutes away or less than that from where we lived. and we used to go there and we used to catch trout off sweet corn because we were so young.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite difficult to keep kids interested, especially if you're fly fishing, because it is quite difficult when you start learning. So yeah, we were fishing with sweet corn, and we would catch a trout, and then the guy would take the trout into his little fishery type shop, but it was also where he had all the tanks of the fish, and so they were homegrown trout. And he would get them on the sideboard and he would cut them open, and it was literally from the lake, and he would take them straight away up to the sideboard, cut them open, and then take out the heart and show us that it was still pumping.
Oh, right.
And I just remember that so vividly, and we were
That's
so
Indiana
interested.
Jones.
Yeah, because as a kid you're so interested in everything, you're curious and you want to ask as many questions as possible, and it was such a cool thing to see. And that's just, yeah. But it was probably a trout. And other than that, when I was 11 I caught my first Atlantic salmon, and then the guy asked me whether I wanted to release it, because normally you kill your first salmon whether you want to catch and release after that, but actually I said to him, no, I want to let it go. So aged 11, just caught my first salmon, let it go. 10 minutes later, caught my second one. And like most of the listeners will know that Atlantic salmon are really hard to catch. So it's a really special moment when you do have one on the end of the line. And yeah, so that was a very
still
cool
not
thing.
caught one. It's on my to-do list this year. I keep talking to, I think you know James Stokes, don't you?
Yes.
So I keep kind of chatting him up to try and get on the Tweed at some point, because I think that's got quite good numbers. If you want to catch one, that's the Tyne. That's a pretty good place to start. So I'm considering trying to get up there this year, and
then you can film the release.
Yeah, well, that had crossed my mind as well. So try not to treat it as work, but you can't.
Yeah.
Slightly off topic, I wondered as well, why is it that you never see bait fisheries for trout? Is it just because they'd be so suicidally easy to catch on bait that it wouldn't be worth doing? Because you next to never see any fisheries that are set up to allow you to bait fish for them, do you? I don't know. Is it just because they'd be really easy, or?
So yeah, I mean, it probably would be easy. Like, to be honest, it's interesting that you said that, because I'm just about to stock a lake at the fishing school. Okay. So and I've decided to go mix, because I want kids to have the opportunity to course fish and fly fish. So I'm going to allow course fishing for kids on the lake, as well as stocking it with some coarse fish as well. Okay. And I think that that's just wonderful, that you can coarse fish and fly fish on the same lake. There's no barriers, there's no, it's all, everyone can come and have a go. And even if I have some people say, oh, can I come coarse fishing on your lake? Of course I'm going to let them go. I don't know why there's such a divide, and I don't know. I really don't know why, because I mean, maybe, yes, it's probably easier to catch trout on sweet corn, or something smelling, something that smells nice.
Maggots. I mean, if you trot a river that's got trout and you're fishing a worm or a maggot, they're on it, straight away. They're they're quite obliging.
But I think it goes back to fish welfare. As long as you get that fish in as quickly as possible, and as long as you handle it the right way, and if it is catch and release, get it back as quickly as possible, keep it in the water, and don't have it on the bank flapping about, because this is how, you might say, and there's a tagline that goes along with this, she went back fine. She was out for a minute and she went back fine. And if you take a fish out of the water, the recovery time is so much longer. So yes, it might kick and it might swim away, but if you haven't handled that fish properly, then the likelihood of that fish popping up, and I don't know, it could be half an hour later, it could be a few minutes later, popping up somewhere that you won't be able to see it, or maybe in a short distance, the likelihood of that is very high. So for anyone who's just about to start fishing, or who's interested, or maybe for people who perhaps can improve their catch and release handling, and everyone can improve, just make sure that the reason why we get to fish is because there are fish to catch. So especially with wild fish, put and take lakes you can get away with, because these fish are farmed heavily. So if you've got a kid that mishandles a fish and it goes back and it does die, it's not the end of the world. But if a wild fish, something really precious, is mishandled, and then you put it back and you think, yeah, it just swam off fine, and you've had it on the bank for ages. And I'm not saying every species is like this, because I know that the carp world, that's slightly different, where you can have the carp out. But at the same time, I heard someone say that the bigger carp, if you get them out onto land for too long, or even the biggest one, the very big ones, out onto land at all, it squishes their organs. So I think we've got to be really mindful of how we treat these fish when they come out, because personally for me, I will 99% try and get into the water with the fish, because I don't have to bring it up on an unnatural surface where it's going to remove its protective slime, or it's going to hit its head, and a lot of people say, oh yeah, but the salmon, if you've got an Atlantic salmon up on the ground, and they say, yeah, but they jump on. Oh,
I can still hear you.
Sorry,
That's okay.
Someone called me. Yeah, it's fine, because salmon jump up waterfalls and hit themselves on rocks. Yeah, okay, that's fine, but that's a natural state that they go through. They don't want to be brought out and lay on the grass or stones, pebbles. So get in the water. Don't be lazy. We've all got legs. We can walk and get into the water. So just caring for the fish is my number one thing. And I hate it when I see mishandling. It really grinds my gears, because it's really easy to look after these fish if we're catching and releasing.
It's clear to see you're quite passionate about that, so which is a good thing, obviously. Have you got a favourite fish?
Atlantic salmon.
Shouldn't really need to ask that, should I?
King of the river.
Yeah. Why? What is it about them? Why the Atlantic salmon?
I think because I've been chasing them since I was so young, since I was 8 years old. So, and it's something that my mother is so obsessed with Atlantic salmon. So I think it's just ingrained in me from such a young age. And I think that because of, the state of the stocks and how they're depleting so fast, I think for me, I'm even more so passionate about the species and trying to, conserve them as much as possible. And I think they're just incredible. I mean, their migratory route is out to Greenland, and what they have to go through to then come back to their birth river is just incredible. You can't even imagine what they've seen, and what they've, how many die from. I mean, at the moment they're saying that at least 50% of smolts, which is a young salmon which goes from the river out to sea to feed, that the 50% of the smolts aren't even making it out to the estuaries. So the problem is in the rivers, which is crazy, because before all the tagging happened, they thought that the problem was out at sea, so they weren't expecting that. And it's just a very sad situation.
Salmon, they've definitely had a hard few years, and I guess they're unusual in that they're one of the few fish that most people, if you said to someone, tell me the life cycle of a salmon, even if they're not an angler or into wildlife, they'd have some idea. They're in the river, they go out to sea. Whereas if you said tell me about a barbel, they'd be like, what's a barbel? So it's quite nice that salmon have got that wider reach. Have you got a favorite venue?
To be honest, my salmon fishing is very sporadic. I mean, I guide on my home river, the River Yor, which is a recovering salmon river. But other than that, I would say Scotland, but I haven't really been able to go up there much over the last year or two. So but if you say to me, okay, you can be anywhere right now, where would you be? And that would probably be in tropical salt water.
Okay, well, like bonefish and tarpon and stuff.
Yeah, bonefish, tarpon, permit, any reef fish. Yeah, so get me to the salt. That's where I am now in my dreams.
I did Cuba last year in January.
Oh,
but it wasn't where all the flats are. So because I in my head I was like, oh, Cuba's an island, it can't be that big. And I was like a 10-hour drive from where they do all the fly fishing. And I was like, oh, so that was a little bit annoying. So I ended up just kind of catching little tiddlers off a pier, but it was still nice. But
that's good though.
I'll get out there at some point, do a little bit of that. I suspect I know the answer to this, but favorite method?
Fly fishing. I mean, fly fishing is something that I've really focused on for so many years now, and I love it, you know. And it's something that keeps me alive. Like I love it. I love it all. And even in the toughest of times, you know, in situations where I've just done 20 days on pike on the Baltic coast, which was so cold, wading, not even on a boat, wading, and it was so cold. And by the end of, you know, 20 days, I just said, I just want to enjoy my life again. I just want to go home, and that was enough for me. So you know, even in the toughest time, but when everything comes together and when you catch a fish in really horrendous conditions, you know, that is something that is so rewarding that you can't even explain to others until they give it a go.
I guess the nice thing with fly fishing as well is it is, well, depends how physically fit you are, but there is an element of exercise to it. Like obviously you can carp fish and you can go to sleep and leave your rods, but with fly fishing, you're moving around, you're constantly casting. Like it's you say to people fishing's good exercise and they're like, oh, you just sit down all day, but fly fishing books the trend for that. Like you can keep relatively fit by fly fishing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of the time fly fishing, you're moving because you're trying to cover as many fish as possible. Whereas with, let's say, carp or sometimes coarse fishing, you're sitting there and waiting for those fish to come into your swim. So it's very, very different. And I think that both aspects are great because some people just want to chill and sit there and enjoy the nature around them, whereas some people, fly fishing suits them better because they want to be more active, they want to walk around, they want to, you know, explore rivers for miles and miles every day. So it's really, really cool that we have so many different types of techniques, methods, and things that suit anyone.
I guess that's because it's so accessible. That's probably one of the reasons why it's such a large participated sport, really, because more or less anyone can do it. And I'll end on this last one. So have you got an angling hero growing up? Was there anyone who like they are someone you kind of learnt a lot from or respected a lot?
Funny you say that because you've just interviewed him.
Oh,
Jeremy Wade was my pin-up. I mean, I have many heroes, but he was, for so long growing up, was my pin-up. And every time someone would mention his name, I'd be like, oh, I love Jeremy Wade. And it's very embarrassing now because actually he came to do a talk at the Your Salmon Group Fishy Dinner. And everyone knew that he was my pin-up when I was younger. And everyone would talk to him, I'm too shy. So anyway, I just went into complete meltdown. But it was really cool meeting him, and he's a really interesting guy. I think he's explored the world and you know, done so many things that everyone would dream about. And at the same time, he sort of brings that home for everyone to watch. And love his investigating type, you know, programs. And I do, yeah. And there's just so many great people out there that have done so much for the sport, and so many heroes that we all look up to. And we're really lucky to have these people that have paved the way and offer so much to the sport.
yeah, he's an absolute legend. He's a lovely chap as well. He's kind of very, very down to earth, and yeah, he's a great guy. Well, look, it's been great chatting to you, Marina, and finding out a little bit more about how you do it and some of the perceptions in angling. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. And again, like, I just want to thank you, and I want to sort of tell you that I've also enjoyed your work, and I think that it's really inspiring. I remember I don't think I met you because you had so many people around you at the London Fly Fishing Fair a few years ago, but I remember looking you up and just seeing all your photos, and I think that was the year that your book came out, I think.
Possibly,
But
yeah.
anyway, I think that it's a really cool thing for anyone to try and actually study these fish underwater, because most of us don't get the chance and don't really know what's happening underneath the water. And that's why it's something that really intrigues me. And I think that you do such an amazing job. The quality of your photos, the adventure that you take yourself on and show us is great.
That's very kind of you. I mean, I will definitely take you up on the. We'll have to do the chalk stream day at some point. Like get in and have a little
Yes,
snorkel. That would be good. Like see how things
that
go
was
this year.
so exciting, and I can't wait for you to come. So I will sort that out next year. It was something because they've got really big pike in there, and they've got undercut banks, and you normally catch them right there. So when I was swimming down, I was just looking right to left thinking, oh God, I'm so scared. It was so, the ribbon weed and it was really spooky, especially when you're by yourself. It can be
Yeah.
really spooky.
Oh, it's
It
great.
really
Great. The
incredible.
adrenaline. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. It is good.
Oh,
We'll
love
definitely do
it.
that, Marina. That sounds good. Well, look, take care.
Okay, thanks so much.
Bye.